Ouch. Hello and welcome everybody to the Portrait Conversation. And I'm very, very honored and happy to welcome a very, very special person, a good friend of mine, someone who has given pleasure to thousands and thousands of people over many, many, many years. So we have truly one of a kind, big band swing leader, George G in the house. Hooray!
Jeremy, thank you so much for that very gracious and perhaps slightly exaggerated welcome.
You know what? I don't think it's exaggerated at all. And the more I've learned about you in the process of preparing for this portrait conversation, the more I really appreciate that one of a kind moniker is really appropriate beyond measure. So one of the things, as we'll be discovering, is that you, George, have been an amazing one of a kind from the moment you started your big band and your big band career 40 years ago to the present day. And you truly are the embodiment of your philosophy, swing makes you happy. The name of your latest CD, but also what you always say on stage as you lead your big band. And, you know, many years now, actually, as the house band at probably one of the only clubs in the world that has live big band music every single night, 7 nights a week, pre-coronavirus. And that is Swing 46, right next to Times Square. So, and before we sort of dive into everything, I just want to again, first of all, to thank you personally, George, for all the pleasure that you've given and you give to so many people. It really has transformed lives, and I personally appreciate it. You've transformed my life. I've been dancing to you for 25 years or so. So, I've seen firsthand.
Thank you, Jeremy.
The other thing is, before we dive in, I want to congratulate you on so many things. So, where to start? This year is the 40th anniversary of your very first professional big band.
4-0.
And so congratulations on a real milestone, 40 years, 4 decades of running a big band and making it work and making people smile. What else is going on? It's 20 years since you met your lovely wife, Mitsumi, actually through Frankie Manning and the lindy community. So congratulations on that anniversary. And also, very important, you were born 60 years ago. It's your 60th birthday year.
Yes, that kind of gets lost in the shuffle, but yes. But yes, I am celebrating 60. I was planning a big celebration, which I always do for my birthdays, but I figured the big 60 would be worthy. I had a West Coast tour plan, and Swing 46 and the Cicada Club. But then that was all yes.
Planning to go to that.
That was all quarantine lockdown. So we have a lot of catching up to do. I'm still gonna celebrate in addition with all my friends with the first opportunity that we have, for sure. But Jeremy, I'm really excited about this project that we're embarking on because one, we've spent so much time and fun in the last week or so preparing for this portrait conversation, and we've known each other for we've been dancing and playing music together for over a quarter century, I think. And this is the first time that you and I have had a chance to really get to know each other. And I'm a big admirer. I'm a new big admirer of your work, Jeremy, for sure.
Thank you very much. Much of which is inspired by the people we know, like Dawn and Frankie and Norman,
of course,
and the dance scene. So let's see other celebrations of yours. I know it's small in compared to the other ones, but 10 years in Astoria, Queens, in your current home.
Yes.
And this week we're celebrating the 106th birthday of your very good friend Frankie Manning.
Yes.
Yes. All of us dancers, Lindy Hop dancers, who had the pleasure of getting to know him personally, were touched by his joy and his joie de vivre that he spread everywhere he went. before we dive into some stories and before I dive into the portrait, because this is a portrait conversation,
Yes,
portrait
of
in
course.
words. And
Please get my good side, Jeremy, all right? It might be the back of my head, though, you know what I mean?
No, you look good. Remember, maybe a Picasso-esque rendition. We don't know yet.
Or maybe Salvador Dali is more appropriate, you know what I mean?
Surrealism, yes. I've got my iPad ready. I've got my
Mm-hmm.
Apple Pencil in hand. So as we start talking, when I look down, it's not because I'm not interested in your stories.
Right, I'm not boring you.
But you know what? This is an interactive thing. We've already got a bunch of people visiting from all over the
Oh,
world, and I'm just
hello, everybody.
quick look at the chat log here, because we've already got some people specifically who've come in to say hello to you. So let me just very quickly share some of the hellos that have come in. So Jackie Jackson says, great music. What was that we were listening to?
I think our introduction number was, of course, by the great Count Basie, the greatest of all, and his version of Moten Swing.
Jackie says, great music, my era. I've been told that my volume is low in compared to George's. So the good news is what you say is way more important. So as long as your volume's up, I'll speak close to my mic and I'll do my best to speak up. But let's see, we have some very special friends of yours visiting. So all the way from St. Petersburg, Russia, Ryan Francois says, hi, George and Jeremy. So Ryan's in the house.
Ryan, I enjoyed your portrait conversation. It was I watched it and saw the portrait. That's my inspiration today.
And then we have someone very special who's been actually instrumental in some of the material we've gathered for this conversation, and that is Joe Landolina, who remembers you from your
Joe
days at the Electric Banana Club in Pittsburgh.
Well, those were some crazy times for sure.
We'll hear about those stories. So Joe is here and he's saying hello, and he has an incredible website, electricbananaclub.net, which actually is where I got a lot of material for this. And Ryan says he wanted to be there to celebrate all the things with you, your birthday and your 40th anniversary of being in business. And then we have Susan Gould.
Susan.
George, Bill sends his love too. So, the radio station was that Gould?
Bill and Susan. Bill, they were our first professional. We played their wedding in Pittsburgh back in the early '80s, and Bill, her husband, was station manager at WRCT, which we'll talk about later on, I'm sure.
So, but we have Mary Bush saying hi in Connecticut. Bill from Rio Rancho. We have Michael Lupinat,
a regular from Swing 46.
Tony and Lyndon Fraser from New York City. Milt Orkin is here.
Milt. Yes,
original...
Milt is a fellow DJ from and an original member of my Pittsburgh Gong Show band from WRCT.
Oh my God!
He's hi Milt.
He says, as one of your original musicians and classmate and fellow WRCT DJs at CMU, I congratulate you on 40 years in the biz. Sending much love.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
So, that said, and my low volume, but your good volume, which is the right way around. So, George, behind me is a very, very special, pivotal photo, and it's a significant transition point in your entire life. So just tell us the story. Who are these two people and what happened? How did you get that photo? So tell us all about it. And I'm going to draw you while you're telling.
If I do say so myself, that photo is of a very youthful myself, 41 years ago, I guess, when I was 19 years old. I was a DJ at WRCT, which was a college radio station at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And of course, I'm sitting next to the very legendary big band man, Mr. Count William Basie. And it was a moment in time that it's always frozen in my mind because it really served as an inspiration to all my big band music aspirations. That photo came upon um, when I had an opportunity to interview Mr. Basie when he did a concert at Carnegie Music Hall, which is right in Pittsburgh by the university campus, and it was an encounter that really, really inspired and set me in motion to really to do the my journey down the big band path. So Jeremy, that photo is so inspirational to myself. The opportunity to meet and talk to Mr. Basie in his dressing room before his concert, and to speak with him and share having him share with me his feelings and thoughts. And when I told him that I wanted to start my own big band at one time in my life, that I was a lover of big band music, he truly listened and shared his wisdom, um, and that to me is something that I hold close to my heart every single moment, not just as a band leader and a big band man, but also as a person. Because Mr. Basie taught me um, that yes, big band music and swing music and swing dancing and jazz is all important, but the most important thing in life is really your character and your soul and the way you present yourself and treat people of in a way that you want to be treated. And I saw that very evident in the way his band um, treated and acted with Mr. Basie's presence. And that's something that I strive for um, as a person and as a band leader, creating a canvas for all this great talent that I'm able to surround myself with, to give them a chance to go beyond the core of duty in producing true big band jazz music, whether it's for dancing or listening, because it's an art form that I it it's an art form that it's so dear to me, um, and why it keeps me going. Um, and the inspiration that Mr. Basie told me in that meeting, in that interview, that moment of time that I spent with him, um, I asked Mr. Basie, Jeremy, what advice can you give me in my pursuit of being a big band leader? And I was expecting the holy grail of big band wisdom. You know what I mean? Like something that I could take with me and go out there and become successful. And mind you, being a big band leader in 1979 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, may not have been the most mainstream activity. um, but Mr. Basie, he took a drag out of his ever-present stogie that was in between his fingers. He took a drag of it, took a sip out of his McDonald's cup of coffee. That was a moment I'll never forget. And he looked me squarely in the eye and said, "Georgie, if you want to be a big band leader, one day, one time in the future, you'll probably encounter a time where you're going to want to give it all up. You're going to want to quit. You're going to say, screw the big band business. And then if you really want to pursue your dream and your goal, then just remember that Count Basie told you, my man Georgie, to persevere. Not just anybody, but Count Basie told you to persevere." And for years and years, I left that time with my meeting, my first encounter with the great Basie, and I really didn't comprehend that. And I have to admit, over the 4 decades that I've been doing this, Jeremy, that on rare occasions, fortunately, I've had to go deep into my heart and soul and my memory bank. At that time, perhaps I wanted to slow down or quit or stop doing this crazy big band biz. Um, but I reached within and said to myself, "But you know what? The greatest big band leader in the entire history, and that might be arguable fact, but I think it's the truth. Hashtag truth. Told you, George G, to persevere." Those were those words of wisdoms that kept me going. And it's and Jeremy, that can apply to anything. It could apply to being a band leader or a singer or or a word processor for a corporate law firm. I mean, you could, if that's something that you really want to do, the perseverance is an adjective. It is an adjective, isn't it? It's something that you need to do. Persevere. So yes,
That's
that is
incredibly beautiful and powerful that he was able to, you know, literally transform your life with that meeting. So that meeting and how it happened is an amazing story. So were you playing basketball? Like you said you were on, what were you doing? You were on campus. It was like the late afternoon, and were you playing sport or something? Or throwing
well. I had some friends in a fraternity. And we were and they we were just tossing a pigskin on the street on Morwood Avenue, where all the fraternities are at Carnegie Mellon, and nonchalantly just hanging out. And I think my station manager or someone from the station, it could have been Bill Gould or somebody, came by and yelled at me, "Hey, do you want to interview Count Basie?" Mind you, this is because I was a DJ of a radio program at WRCT. A little backstory: I was a DJ of a big band program called a Make Believe Ballroom. So while the station had a wide scheduling of alternative music, I was in fact, Milt and myself, Milt Orkin, one of the members here, we were doing jazz shows, and I did a big band jazz show called a Make Believe Ballroom. So they knew that it was a good opportunity for me to go interview Count Basie on this campus concert. So I got my sound engineer and a photographer, and we ran down backstage at Carnegie Music Hall down the block, and I s- I snuck into the backstage literally and saw in the crack of the door the legendary, iconic Mr. William Basie in the sitting there, but in his vest and his shirt and his tie. And I very timidly knocked on his door, and he said, "Come on in." And I come on in, and then I said, "Mr. Basie, my name is George G. I'm a big band DJ at WRCT, the campus radio station, and I'd like to interview you." And he very uh, he paused and said, "I'm happy to do so. After the sound check, I'll come back and we'll spend a few moments chatting." So I said, "Great." So he says, "If you want to, you can sit down in our dressing room." So I sat down with my crew, only two other people, and we were very excited about the potential of interviewing Count Basie. And so he went, and then he went on to do his sound check. And I remember hearing the band doing April in Paris in the background, doing the sound check. And I was sitting there, and all of a sudden, all these tech people with their lights and cameras and stuff like that came barging into the room and started setting up. And I asked them, what's up, you know? And they said, "Oh, we're from a local TV station, and we have a live interview with Count Basie to promote this concert, and we're setting up for it." So obviously, I was really dejected because I figured the big boys from broadcast television was kicking my butt out of the dressing room. So we went back into the hallway, and we were kind of dejected about possibly losing the interview with Basie. And after the sound check, Mr. Basie came out, and he kind of looked around, and he said, literally, the old Frank Sinatra mantra. He said, "What's all these people doing in my room?" I've never ever heard. I've really never heard someone use that in that context. You know what I mean? And the producer of the TV broadcast rushed over to Mr. Basie with a clipboard and said, "Oh, I'm so and so from KDKA TV, and we're doing a live broadcast, a live interview with you on our 6 o'clock broadcast." And I never forget that Mr. Basie looked around, once again took a toke on his stogie, blew his smoke out in a big, thick cloud, and said, "But I promised my man Georgie an interview first. So you guys just have to wait till Georgie and I are finished." So he exited everybody out from his dressing room, and he asked me to come back in. And Mr. Basie and I sat down. I said, "Mr. Basie, out of respect, I promise that I will keep this short." And he said, "You know what, Georgie, take all the time you want. Those guys can stand out in the hallway and cool their heels down and wait." And I said, "Okay." So Mr. Basie and I spent some time talking, and we recorded part of the interview, but not the entire interview. But anyway, we stayed there to the very end. And from what I understand, the TV show station never got their live interview, and that was the first pleasant time that I spent with Mr. Basie out of many, many more in the upcoming years afterwards, for sure. Quite a momentous occasion, if I do say so myself.
Wow, that is very, very special. So let's actually play a little bit of that interview. This is you in Swing 46, which is where I feel I'm watching you at the moment.
Missed that joint.
Virtual background. Here we go. So listen here, and we'll see the beginning of the interview.
Okay, this is George G here in the dressing room, Carnegie Music Hall in Oakland, and we're having an exclusive interview with a very famous personality of the music world. We have out of the music world, we have the Duke of Swing, we have the King of Swing. We have here the Count of Swing, Mr. Count Basie, who's appearing tonight with the Ozanam Strings in Carnegie Music Hall. Mr. Basie, we just have a few simple questions while we ask.
Oh yes, no, Georgie. Let me correct you. And then one thing you said was ever say the Duke of Swing, it's Duke of Ellington. Oh yeah, because that man to me is just everything. He must have a better introduction than the Duke of Swing. He didn't swing. He was just everything. That's beautiful. He could swing if he wanted, but his music was flowers, and poets and poems and all those sort of things. He just so you wouldn't say the Duke of Swing. Cause you were just thinking because we had some titles. That's how I got my name. Is because they tried to find a little gimmick name. They said, "Well, we've got a Duke of Ellington and Baron of Lee and Earl of Hines." And Paul Whiteman at that time, in those years, he was the king of swing. And so he naturally is a man, a Duke of Royalty.
That's a real good way of putting it, Mr. You mind if I call you Count instead of...
You can call me Count or Bill, whatever, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Oh, thank you, Count.
That is precious. That is so beautiful. So Ellington, and it's so interesting that he actually doesn't look at Ellington just in swings. Do you want to say a little bit about Ellington, Basie, and also what you got out of that comment, both at the time, but also looking back now 40 years later, 41 years.
A little bit yes,
Basie, Ellington.
By the way, Ryan, that whole interview is on my YouTube channel. So if you search George G. String Orchestra, I have that whole interview is on my YouTube channel because I think some folks was asking about that interview. But I find it so funny now because calling him Count, because I never called him Count again because I learned that everyone called him Mr. Basie, rightfully so, of course, you know. So from that point on, uh, I called uh, Count Mr. Basie, and which is a good title for him, of course. And you know, his story about Duke was, you know, his love for Duke Ellington was so evident. His respect, and all the great band leaders from that era, especially, have had so much joy and respect for each other, and especially Mr. Ellington and Mr. Basie. Um, I could tell Mr. Basie thought so highly of Mr. Ellington's um, great skill, not just as a big band leader, but as a composer and an arranger. And truthfully, I learned later on in the future when I listened to I analyzed more of Mr. Ellington's music, that his music was very multi-layered and multifaceted. And Basie's swing, you know, emulating from that Kansas City style, is more rhythmic and raw. While Mr. And mind you that Ellington's big band jazz was always swinging, of course, but it just had such a much more of orchestral feel to it when possible. I mean, a lot of folks think of Ellington's repertoire to include some standards that he wrote with Billy Strayhorn, like Harlem Air Shaft and Take the A Train and Cottontail. And those are all great dance numbers and big band jazz numbers. But his repertoire of of arrangements and composition is so expansive, especially in the latter years. I mean, when he wrote the Far East Suite, and when he had tunes when we played the Newport Jazz Festival, like Diminuendo and Crescendo and Blue and such. It really pushed the envelope in big band composition and arrangement, and that was evident, I think, in Mr. Basie's accolade of Duke Ellington for sure. That's where I got out of it. Um, I think it's evident that the big band era, it was band leaders were naturally competitive because it's just human nature, and it should be because artists uh, always want to put out their best, whether you're a musician or a painter. Um, so I think Mr. Basie and Mr. Ellington and all the other great big bands of the era always had a high respect for each other, but at the same time, they always tried to, I guess, be the best. And there's nothing wrong with that, if I'm understood correctly, for sure.
And I think, you know, what you were saying about his humility and acknowledgement of respect for others is something that, you know, we should all bear in mind, whatever our, you know, art form is of any kind, right? And I'm curious, having, you know, such a momentous impact on you personally, has anybody ever come up to you, George, and said, George, you know, I really want to be a band leader. I love what you do. Do you have any advice? Or not just a band leader, a musician who's come up and, you know, just ask for your advice, sort of in a fatherly, sort of mentor way. George, can you share something, you know, have you ever had the opportunity to give back in that way that Count Basie gave to you?
Yes. Well, you know, if you've been around 4 decades like I have been, Jerry, I guess young band leaders are abound, which is great, especially with the current resurgence of the modern swing era. I mean, for me, when I first started out with my big band 40 years ago, there was no resurgence of swing big band music or dancing. That was actually, I was still behind, you know, I was still a decade or so before it became mainstream again, which evidently took me by surprise. That the fact that big band's music would become popular again, and it is still popular, big band music and big band dancing. And I, I tend, I think my tendency to support other band leaders that I deem worthy, because really, I think humility is it's something that I really try to practice, that I try to seek from um, my colleagues, whether they're in the big band business, and I just try to set an example rather than outright giving out advice, because I'm in no shape, way, or imagination in the same league as even Mr. Basie's. I'm not in his league, and you know, and I've resigned myself to realize that I will never be. And so for me to give advice is, I think, presumptuous. But I can lead by example. I can show by example. I can do my best performance and treat my musicians and my audience with the utmost respect 24/7. Make sure my band is swinging and playing happy music, because swing makes you happy is not just something that I made up one night. It's something that I truly believe in. And I always want to make sure that my canvas is able to stoke that creativity and that joy among everybody in that audience, in that stage, whether it's a 10-piece band or a 17-piece band, or whether there's 10 people on a quiet night at the club, or there's like 5,000 people at a big swing dance jazz concert event. And I always try to do my best to attend events. It's hard, I try to go to see other bands in the circuit, and I try to support by example. I believe I'm unbeknownst to perhaps a lot of other fellow band leaders. I download their music. I try to buy their recordings. I support their crowdfunding. I promote their crowdfunding. I promote their engagements. Perhaps, I try my best to do that, Jeremy. And I don't think anyone wants advice from me, because I don't think I have that much advice to go out, to tell you the truth. And I just think, my one thing that I have on all these other band leaders out there is, I guess, 40 years of this craziness. So if they want to, it's like that old Abbott and Costello routine where I don't know the exact dialogue, but I think Abbott said, the Costello liked the girl that was younger, and then like in 10 years, like right now that he's 4 years older than her, but in 10 years they'll be, she'll be 3 years younger. And then the question is, how long does you have to wait before you're the same age, which obviously is never going to happen. But so that 4 decades of being a crazy, uh, uh, big band leader with this focus on this path is a badge of honor that I wear, and it's a badge of honor I wear. I'm proud of my my endurance. Yeah, endurance. Yeah.
Well, I think that what you just said about simply your observation of Basie's band and the way he treated his band members and the way they treated him. And you've told me that you saw him again and again, and you would always observe that incredible sort of almost family-like respect. They always called him Mr. Basie. Why you called him Mr. Basie? And I think that's a lesson for us all, the respect for our team, basically, as well as for the outer world, the inner world and the outer world.
Right, right.
Now, at the end of that interview, not only did you ask him for the photograph, you asked him for another favor. And again, he was incredibly generous. Here was someone who just literally knocked on his door out of the blue when he's got so busy, he's about to go on stage, he's got his rehearsal, his sound check. You come in out of the blue and you ask him to do what? And we'll play it. What did you ask him to do at the very end of the interview? He did a little something for you to play on your radio.
Oh. Right. Well, I explained to Mr. Basie that I was a DJ of big band jazz music at this college radio station, and he was so enamored by that because college radio was reaching a more youthful audience for for big band music. So I told him that I did a weekly program called the Make Believe Ballroom on WRCT 88.3 FM in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Radio Carnegie Tech, and would he do a promo spot for me? And he was so gracious, and he did it. And I actually think the promo spot is actually more is better than the actual interview.
And did you, by the way, use this promo spot regularly after that for your program? Was this your?
Oh yeah. Yeah, just to hear his voice. I mean, that voice. I mean, come on. It was
Okay.
to hear him voice and my name in the same sentence was made me feel like I was walking on sunshine.
Okay. With that build up, let's hear the WRCT George G promo spot.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is Count Basie, and when I'm in Pittsburgh, I always listen to my man Georgie and his program.
Thanks, Count. And that's the Make Believe Ballroom, Tuesday at 6 p.m. on WRCT, Pittsburgh.
Yep.
Wow, that's you're right. His voice. If he wasn't a band leader, he should, that voice should be on TV and radio no matter what. He had such a wonderful voice. So I'm just gonna show a very quick look at my iPad screen and share what I've been doing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and see, I don't know if you've had a chance to see on the little art cam that I've got going here, but this is where we're at so far. And,
Oh, okay.
it's getting there. It's getting there. It's a rough. But because you mentioned Dali, I guess I should do a floppy clock in the background or something. I've still got a lot of work to do on that. And
I think it looks pretty good. I think it looks pretty good so far. It's catching me in a good light, and I hope the folks that are in our chat room, I hope you guys like it too. We'd love to hear your comments about it. I think it looks better than me in real life. What do you think?
Well, it's just beginning, and it's on a background which is actually dear and near to you, because that is which we'll talk about in a little bit, but maybe you could just say what the background is. The hand arrangement by someone who became a good friend and mentor of yours, and he wrote that arrangement. So what am I painting on?
The manuscript music in the background is the original manuscript handwritten by Chick Webb's theme song, Let's Get Together, by the composer, Mr. Van Alexander. And Mr. Van Alexander he just passed away a few years ago at the age of 100. And I was fortunate to know him for the last 2 years of his life. And Van Alexander, besides composing "Let's Get Together" for Chick Webb, and he adopted it as his theme song. But he's also the arranger of the famous arrangement of "A Tisket, a Tasket" that Ella Fitzgerald made a big hit of with Chick Webb's band. And my music director, Mr. David Gibson, who plays trombone in my band and also composes and arranges a lot of my repertoire with my current big band. And David and myself had a really good opportunity to meet and Mr. Van Alexander at a show that we did in Culver City, Los Angeles, at a Battle of the Big Bands program a few years ago, and that was really a special moment because to have such a connection with the lineage of classic big band arrangement and composition is historic. And he was such a gentleman, and he was so debonair, and he was 99 and a half years old, and he was like a Hollywood movie star in casual wear. I remember, he was just like, but he was one of the most prolific big band composers and arrangers back from the Chick Webb days at the Savoy Ballroom, and then he migrated to Hollywood and wrote music for Dean Martin and Peggy Lee and Doris Day and all those great singers from the Capitol Studio days.
And he reached out to you and
Yes.
supported your last CD out of the blue, right? You just heard from him and
Right. Well, I did have a connection with a documentary about Chick Webb, like in 2009, I believe, and somehow we connected, and he supported my fundraising campaign for Swing Makes You Happy, and he sent me his original arrangement of Let's Get Together for the 17-piece big band, which I really have a lot of pride in using and playing. So he was very supportive. And, Van Alexander's story is very interesting because he's not your typical Savoy Ballroom big band patron. He's not a dancer. He was this tall, gawky, Caucasian kid that loved to go to the Savoy Ballroom in Harlem to listen to Chick Webb's swinging big band, and he had an opportunity to present with Chick Webb with some of his arrangements, and he became one of Chick Webb's top arrangers and composer all during the Savoy Ballroom days, and his path to big bandom is very unorthodox, if I do say so, for sure. So Van Alexander is another very special part. Jeremy, I've been so blessed to connect with so many, I don't want to say celebrities as much as messengers from the big band era, from the jazz world. Being whether the big band or jazz, of course, Mr. Basie. I mean, he sent me over the years what I consider many Basie angels to watch over me. I mean, I recorded a CD with the great Frank Foster, who arranged and composed a great Lindy Hop favorite, Shiny Stockings. I did an album with Mr. Foster like 15 years ago called Setting the Pace, and he was very supportive of the big band. Other Basieites include trombonist Benny Powell and another saxophonist by the name of Frank West. They were always truly supportive and keeping an eye on me as my big band career evolved over the decades, for sure. I was really pleasured to know many original Basie alumnus over the years. Being in New York, I've had a chance to really encounter and perform or just hang out with some of the top echelon, and even in my band, because I had Eddie Pizant, a saxophonist that who played in my saxophone section for 25 years, and his resume include playing with the great Lionel Hampton big band and Billie Holiday. We miss Eddie so much, and of course this trombonist Eddie Burt, who played in my band in New York. He played by Woody Herman and Buddy Rich and Stan Kenton and Charlie Barnett, and he recorded with all the greats, whether the big band or bebop, and it's just a privilege. I'm so humble to be even mentioned in the same, not even the breath, just in the same paragraph with these greats, and we're losing them slowly but surely. And we just lost Jimmy Heath late a little while ago, and I was whether it was Jimmy Heath or meeting Joe Williams or Billy Eckstein or Maxine Sullivan or all these great jazz greats. Roy Eldridge, Clark Terry, of course. It's amazing. It's amazing. One day, Jeremy, as part of my 40-year anniversary memoir project, I got to make a list of all the jazz greats that I've had the pleasure of being associated with. You know, and once I put that list together, Jeremy, it's probably going to impress even myself. You know.
Well, it's true that you literally have history in your band, and you've had over the many years these incredible relationships, going to dinner with Count Basie and his wife on a couple of occasions, and I mean it's really an amazing connection that you've had with the 1940s big band era, which you love so much. And I'd like to sort of turn the clock a little bit backwards to your own background and upbringing and everything. Before I do that, I'm just going to take a couple of minutes here. There's a lot of messages. We're not going to be able to sort of thoroughly respond to them, but I just want you to know that you've got a lot of love out there, George.
Thank you.
I'll just very, very quickly, Peggy from San Francisco. Looking forward to celebrating 60 with you. Cheryl, the sculptor, is saying hi from London. And Ryan wants the picture of you and Basie on his wall. So,
with all my hair.
with all your hair.
It was the 70s. Don't forget.
And then Michael Lupinacci says, "Hey George, in that picture, you're not much older than Glenn is now, your son, right?" Which actually, that must be sort of. How old is your son?
He'll be 18 in a few months. And I was, yes.
1 year.
Wow.
So Ryan says, George, that's why George is the best and still here. And let's see. Okay, Joe Hartley shared your link for your promo so that people can listen to the whole thing. John Welch said he has a question. Could I unmute? But we're trying to get through so much. If it's possible to write your question down, that would be better. Peggy loves the Count Basie story. And okay, just having a look. Milt Organ says, that my audio is low. Let's have a look, see if there's any other. Okay, this is interesting. So Milt says, what George has that every great band leader had is the ability to recognize talent and to put people together that appreciate each other's abilities, that love making music together, and are inspired by George's love for the music. So that's a beautiful
accolade. True.
Yeah. And Bill Jemison remembers the big bands from the 60s with Don Ellis, big band. Wondered if you knew Don Ellis.
No.
Yeah. So, and Milt says that for everyone who ever played for George for any length of time, both in Pittsburgh and New York City, will tell you he's the source.
Milt, I'll PayPal you $25 later on, all right?
Yeah. So Milt as well, fabulous portrait. So Susan says that it's a timeless rendition of George, who's gotten so much cooler looking since meeting Mitsumi. So I think your wife has had a good impact there.
No doubt.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to dive back into the keynote, and we're going to just play a little music, and then I want you to chat about how this relates to your life.
Let's dance in a mansion or hallroom. Here's your make-believe ballroom. Let's dance romance at the tip of your fingers while the melody lingers. Let's dance, dance, dance. Just start in swaying while the band is playing. Music is worth your while. Let this station give you dancing. Simply turn the dial and keep on dancing, though you've only a small room. Make it your ballroom. Let's dance.
So George, share us a little bit about what that music was, who Martin Block and WNEW, was, and then who we're looking at now, and the connection between all of those three things.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I was a little I was just admiring the photo. That's a photo of my dad, and he was a Navy man on the I believe the USS North Carolina. And before I go into the story of my dad's placement in this whole big band lineage, is that I wanted to say congratulations to my dad, because he was just awarded a posthumous congressional medal for his service in the war. And we were actually supposed to go down to D.C. for a ceremony with Speaker of the House Pelosi, but unfortunately that was delayed because of the quarantine. So my dad, when the Make Believe Ballroom program came back in New York City on WNEW in the mid '70s, my dad and I used to listen to that program while I worked with him at his hand laundry on the Upper East Side of New York City, and he would tell me stories about his time in World War II, which he never really talked about. But he would say that the original Make Believe Ballroom was broadcast over the ship on the speakers, so folks could listen to the big band sounds of like Benny Goodman and Glenn Miller and Count Basie and Duke Ellington, and that was like the first time that my dad and I actually had a special moment. And he would talk about listening to the music and how it was, a great escape during that era of his time in the Navy. So when I went to Pittsburgh to develop, and I was lucky enough to have a radio program on WRCT, I thought it would be appropriate to name the program the Make Believe Ballroom, because I was playing big band music, especially in a repertoire of radio shows that was purely new wave and punk rock in that era at the radio station. So that version of the Make Believe Ballroom by Charlie Barnett and his band with the Moderneers vocal group served as our theme song for my version of the Make Believe Ballroom, and that was also the theme song for the WNEW program.
So
At that time,
there was a lot of then echoes. So an echo of your very special time with your dad listening to that program, thinking about him listening to it when he was in the Navy, and also the sense of escape, right? Make Believe Ballroom, that you escape to another world through this beautiful music of the
right
and swing era.
I always think still that the Make Believe Ballroom is a magical place where you go. And the lyrics actually states that, Jeremy. It's a place where you go to forget your troubles and be happy. There's that word again, happy. So, and more than ever nowadays, we need that darn Make Believe Ballroom more than ever. You know what I mean? And I'm not just talking about the quarantine. It's so much other stuff going on that the Make Believe Ballroom, we could use an escape there,
Where were you born?
I'm a native New Yorker. I grew up on the Upper East Side in New York City, and that's a photo of me and my mom on the apartment on 2nd Avenue and 83rd Street. I just talked to my mom earlier today and told her about this program. But she's not very tech savvy, so I'm gonna have to play it for her one day. When I go see her again after the lockdown. But yes, that's. I think I'm 3 years old in that photo.
Wow.
Pretty cute, don't you think?
And so your family had a Chinese hand laundry, I gather. Is that
right? Chinese hand laundries are so popular. You don't hear about them anymore. But you would bring shirts and clothing to a Chinese hand laundry in New York, or in major cities, I guess, and they would do it. Some by hand, some not, I guess. And they would package it in a brown wrapper and tie it up with some twine, and you would get them a ticket, and they would give you you would get this bundle of clean laundry. So my dad and I used to help my dad regularly when I was young at his shop, which is still there. I mean, it's owned by another management or another, but instead of a Chinese hand laundry, I guess it's a French laundry now. You know what I mean?
Fresh Cleaners New York, I think it's called. But but that's the actual building. And actually, George and I tried to find this on Google Street View, and what's absolutely hilarious, but very New York, is that there was a huge truck double parked in front of the location of his dad's old Chinese hand laundry. So if you look on
Yeah.
Street View, all you see is the side of a truck.
Right. Yeah.
When you were working in the laundry as a kid, what exactly did you do?
I did a variety of tasks helping my dad. I mean, I was really I worked the counter. I greeted customers and clients and accepted their laundry and got their packages. And I did some various tasks like ironing and sewing, I guess. But I was really I guess I was the front person at the Chinese at JG's Hand Laundry, which is what it was called. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so interesting that later in your career you are a front man, and there in the laundry you definitely were also a front man, right? You were
Yes.
welcoming people and that
Yes.
joie de vivre and that friendliness and that social. I mean, all the things that that you connect with your audience so beautifully.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. And that was my first encounter with the general public as a whole. I would phantom for sure.
That beautiful picture of your dad. First of all, he looks so young.
Mm.
Roughly, have you any idea how old he was when that picture was taken?
Um, I would assume in his early 20s, possibly. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure to tell you the truth. I guess I could, if I did some deductions on my calculator, perhaps. But yeah, um, early 20s seems about right.
Right. Um, and tell us a little bit as a teenager. There you are. Tell us a little bit about your connection with swing music growing up as a teenager in New York. So, what were you doing at junior high school and going out, going to concerts? Tell us about it a bit.
Well, I learned. I don't know. Not many people know that I am. I used to be practicing upright basses, and I, I learned playing bass in the New York City public school system when they actually had a musical education program, which is sorely lacking these days. But that's another story. And that's a photo of myself when I played bass in school in high school at Stuyvesant High School in New York City. Um, I was playing in the orchestra, but classical music wasn't my bag. So when there was an opportunity for a bassist to join the stage band, which is really a big band in high school, the Stuyvesant High School stage band, I jumped at the opportunity and joined that ensemble playing in the rhythm section of the big band. And that was really my first foray into big band, playing big band music. So I had an opportunity to play in the band. We played everything from Glenn Miller to Average White Band to Casey and the Sunshine Band. It was like our repertoire was so vast, and unfortunately, I gave up playing the bass over 30 years ago. When I came back to New York City, um, I I actually stopped playing, and honestly, leading a big band with a bass it's a difficult front person instrument because you're constantly playing that four to the bar for that swing rhythm. But at the same time, Jeremy, I I try to surround myself with much, much, much more credible jazz musicians that I could ever be. Um, I always like to say, in the words of the very prolific Groucho Marx, never join a club that would have you as a member. You know what I mean? So um, I can I wish I could say that I'm nearly as talented musically as the musicians I'm blessed to surround myself with, but it would be a far journey to become of that level, which is good because that means that I have great cats in my fold, which I do, for sure.
And what was your first big band concert you ever went to and saw real live big bands?
That's a funny story because that's actually a memory that I recollected just recently, and before the radio station and even before listening to big band music with my dad at the laundry, um, I recall in a mental flashback that I went to my first big band concert at Carnegie Hall in June of 1974. That would make me 14 years old. And I distinctly remember going to a jazz festival concert, a double bill that featured Woody Herman and Stan Kenton. Um, and up to recently, I had no recollection of that, Jeremy. So it really surprised even myself that I attended that concert and saw it. And I remember now that I really enjoyed it. And their music was so different than the Basie style. Woody Herman had at that stage in the 70s, in the early 70s, he had a very kind of a jazz-rooted orchestra that really did not, quote-unquote, play for any sort of dance rhythms. And Stan Kenton's big band has always been known as sort of a concert big band. Even in the heyday of the big band era, his music was more a concert supper club setting that did not encourage dancing. So those were the first two big bands I saw. And just to be able to say that I saw Woody Herman and Stan Kenton is historic in its own way. But at Carnegie Hall also, for sure.
Obviously, it musically it left an impression. I mean, you loved big band and you continued to explore big band as a teenager, right?
Sure. I've been during those early big band days, before I was a really career big band man, I was really able to see some great big bands. I mean, I saw Harry James, not the real Harry James band, and I saw Benny Goodman on several occasions. To actually see the King of Swing playing, and he sounded great. So and I saw Woody Herman, and it's really amazing that I had the opportunity to see somebody, and of course I saw Lionel Hampton. Lionel Hampton was an opportunity that I was able to see many times. So to see all those legendary performers perform, was quite a task, quite an amazing task. Jeremy, I even had a chance to see Frank Sinatra one time. Yes, I saw Frank Sinatra at the old Sands Casino in Atlantic City, back like 25 years ago or so. So he wasn't at the top of his game, but just seeing him perform was quite amazing.
So something happened, George. So you were playing bass in the junior high school band. You were listening to big band music with your dad on the radio. You were going to concert band. You loved music. And then you went from New York City to Pittsburgh to study mechanical engineering at Carnegie Mellon University. And so first of all, had you always had an interest in mechanical engineering? What happened and why mechanical engineering and why Pittsburgh?
Sometimes I jokingly say I used to be smart, Jeremy. I went to a very high-ranking high school in New York City, Stuyvesant High School, that specialized in science and math. And, the stereotypical Asian American, or specifically Chinese American, a path to a career is usually either being a doctor or an engineer. And I chose being an engineer, and I got a great, I had a good opportunity to go to Carnegie Mellon University. And I went there and started my engineering career. And, to be very honest, it wasn't something that was in my heart, but it was something I felt like I was obligated to pursue. So I'm glad I took the big band route instead. I think I'm more contented being a big band leader for sure.
Though your mom and dad were keen to see you in one of the professions, right?
Yeah. In my parents' eyes, I may not be as successful if I would have been a working engineer. I'm sure, for sure. To this day.
I think you've given a lot more pleasure to people. So you're at university. You're doing mechanical engineering. You love music. Tell us about how on earth did you become a radio DJ with a weekly program on Big Band Swing? What happened? How did you connect with WRCT?
Well, actually, my friend Milt, who is here in the chat room, I don't know if he's still out there, Milt. Let us know if you are. But Milt was a DJ of a Saturday morning jazz program at WRCT, even before myself. And one day I heard him playing "Take the A Train," and I went into the studio and met Milt for the first time, and he introduced me to the world of college radio. And I went to like some orientation meetings and met up with some of the staff. And I actually started. I proposed a big band radio show, not just a jazz radio program, but a big band program, a radio program specifically catering to big band music. And Jeremy, they thought I was freaking crazy. I mean, they, but they took a chance on me, and I had a program. Even before I had a Tuesday evening 6 o'clock prime time program, they started me at like at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night, because I was the only slot that was open, and I actually developed a following, and people listened to the music, and one thing led to another, and I was on the regular schedule with my version of the Make Believe Ballroom.
Wow! And actually, on that subject, we have a comment from Susan. Let's see, Susan G. Who, that my mum was a World War II bride and fell in love with George when she learned that he had a big band radio show named after her favorite radio show as a teenager. So
Wow.
it really resonated. And just having a look. So Charlene Choi.
Charlene.
Hi. She says, I'm so lucky to have crossed paths with Gigi, the heart of gold. And as an Asian American myself, we are far and few, and so glad to share this passion for this swing era.
Wow. Charlene is, I've known Charlene for a long time, and she's a lovely person and a vintage Art Deco lover out in Los Angeles. She used to live in New York City, and we're always her house guests whenever we tour the West Coast. So, Charlene, we hope to see you back in sunny LA pretty soon.
Yeah, well, she carries on to say that share the passion for the swing era, the music, the fashion, the dance. She says, I always get to brag about you, George, the one and only Chinese American swing band leader.
That's
for all you've
that is true. That's another part of being Asian American or Chinese American. It's besides being younger and loving big band music, that was kind of a novel approach to it. But being Asian American actually added a different layer of mystery to this whole my whole project. I guess it was very unusual for an Asian American big band leader, especially in the beginning, for sure. But I'm proud to be Asian American. I got to meet one of my Asian American idols a few years ago, George Takei. George Takei, Lieutenant Sulu from Star Trek. When I grew up, the only Asian American idol that I had in the media was George Takei, and his presence on a network Star Trek show was amazing to me. And then a few years ago, I met him. I had backstage when he did a Broadway show called Allegiance, based on the Japanese internment camps. And I was starstruck, and I don't get starstruck very easily, Jeremy. But meeting George Takei was, and just I shook his hand, and I think I held his hand so long that after a few minutes he had to yank it back. You know what I mean?
Talking of the Japanese internment, did your parents ever chat to you about that? And as Chinese Americans, did they feel a great affinity to other Asian Americans and also the prejudice and what they had suffered especially on the West Coast in the Second World War? Did your mom and dad ever talk to you about that?
No, well, my mom didn't come to America till post World War II. My dad was in the service, so he really wasn't, didn't encounter the hardships of the internment camps, and I think that was more geared towards Japanese Americans. They were able to, the Chinese American were not as affected by those atrocities, for sure.
We have a few other people saying hi, friends of yours, Simon and Anna from London.
All right, Simon Selman, yes.
Got this piano tie, which I'm wearing in honor of String 46, because outside String 46 there's an awning with the piano's keys. So I'm wearing this for you, George.
All
but I
right.
just got it delivered from Simon and Anna from Swing Dance UK. And then
Yes.
Your wonderful, wonderful friend, Margaret Badichuk. Hi, Margaret. She's there.
Yeah, Margaret gave me hired us for one of our first shows in New York City for the New York Swing Dance Society back in the 80s when we used to drive in on a bus from Pittsburgh. And, Margaret has done great work and continues to do great work promoting swing and lindy hop and big band music. So it's always great to see her, even if it's here online.
Very big part of your history. She sent lots of photos. So just so you know, because obviously we've got 20 minutes left on this segment, we're still got some really important Pittsburgh stories to cover. So just for everyone who's wondering, well, and Ryan was saying you're going to talk about the Frankie Cruises and the
Yes.
New York Dance Society. We will cover that next week. We're going to come back in a week's time for segment 2. But meanwhile, let's just dive back in to the Pittsburgh story, and let's see. One of the fascinating things is you had this interview with Count Basie, transformation, and then something happened in the following few months. That tell us about your very, very first big band show, why it happened, how it happened, and how you got it together. So what you had the Count Basie interview, you were like, whoa, enamored, and then what happened?
Well, that directly inspired me. When I left that interview with Count Basie, my mission was to start my first big band. So I went back to my radio station and the management, like Bill Goo and the general manager and everybody, and I said, I want to start a big band, and I want you guys to sponsor it. And they looked at me and said, yes, what a great idea. So at Carnegie Mellon University in the springtime, they have a big event called Spring Carnival, and they have this tent of entertainment. And they had this contest called the Gong Show. And back then, I don't know if people of this era remember the Gong Show, but it was a talent show, but it was tongue in cheek. And so I gather a bunch of musicians from the radio stations on our campus, and not necessarily music students, but just folks that played an instrument. And we got together and rehearsed the same 3 songs endlessly and got ready for the Spring Carnival Gong Show at CMU.
Do you remember which songs they were?
Those 3 songs that the radio station sponsored us to buy and purchase were 3 Glenn Miller tunes. And because I couldn't find any Count Basie numbers at that time. But Glenn Miller tunes were easy to find. So I got Moonlight Serenade, A String of Pearls, and of course the ubiquitous In the Mood. And we practiced those 3 songs. We played it at the Gong Show. And we competed against, I guess, some guy who played spoons and some contortionists who could bend his body in different ways. And we played those 3 songs, and the crowd went wild, and they wanted an encore, and all we could do was play In the Mood again. So we played We played In the Mood. We just played. We played it again, and the crowd went wild. And then they ended the contest right there and then, and that was my first paying gig because we took the prize money of $26.18, a crazy number, yes, and we divvied it up among the 17, 18 musicians, and that was our first paying gig.
Wow.
And as they say, the rest is history.
Wow.
That
Is it actually the gig?
that is a photo from the first gig. That on clarinet there with the Panama hat is a dear friend of mine, Dave Kaplowitz. He lives in Austin, Texas now, and he was our first music director. He helped me rehearse the band, and he was playing the clarinet on Moonlight Serenade in that number. As you can see, it was a hot, humid April day in Pittsburgh, and the tent was crowded, and people didn't know what the heck a swing big band was. But they were fans of the radio show, and they came and supported our first show, and it was a really memorable occasion. In fact, last April, which was the 40th anniversary of that show, Carnegie Mellon University alumni was going to bring me and the band back from New York City to do a big reunion concert and a big swing dance event. But unfortunately, due to the current health situation, that show will be postponed to a future date. But yes, the first show at Carnegie Mellon University, 40 years ago, April.
That's going to be quite a show when that happens.
When that happened, yes.
There's many things about you, George, that are remarkable and amazing. But one of them is there you are. You've got enthused about the big band, and I was saying to you before, you didn't just incrementally work up to it. You dove in. You saw what you wanted to do as a dream, and you went straight for 17-piece big band. You didn't gradually work up, and you said, I want to create a 17-piece big band, and you did it, and you made it happen, and this gong show was a great vehicle to allow you to put it together. So tell us a bit about that process. Your vision, you had a vision, and it was a big band.
Yes, I was very narrow-minded in my pursuit of the big band. And the typical range, composition, a configuration of a big band is those 17 musicians, 5 saxes, 8 brass, 4 rhythm, and such. So my mission was, and to this day, is to preserve the big band. Mind you, in the last couple of decades, that I also have a smaller ensemble, a 10-piece big band, which is still a big band because it still has a typical arrangement and core and response of the horn section. My arranger in the band right now, Mr. David Gibson, he has really taken that 17-piece instrumentation and able to streamline it for the 10-piece band, the 6 horns, and give it that big sound. So I don't really lose much in the smaller instrumentation with these great arrangements. So mind you that we always want to work with a 17-piece big band these days, but sometimes out of necessity, which includes budget and spacing, the 10-piece ensemble does carry quite a big band wallow, if I do say so myself. Me and the musician and everybody misses Swing 46 so much because that was our make-believe ballroom. It was a haven for great big band jazz. My 10-piece band there with singer John Dokes was there every Tuesday, many Fridays, and once a month on a Sunday night, I would bring the 17-piece big band. And it was a great place to have a home for big band jazz in the center of the universe in Times Square, Broadway, New York City. I can't wait to go back there.
We all can't wait, and we look forward to many more evenings of enjoyment at Swing 46. So you've just done the gong show. You've hit the big time, won the prize.
The big time.
The other transition thing. Okay, so you've got this big band. They're mostly students at the university. Do you start knocking on doors saying, hey, I've got a big band. We've done one gig. Will you hire us? And how did you go from that one gig to, hundreds of gigs a year in a short space of time? So how did you develop your band business in Pittsburgh at that moment as a student?
Well, My first series of shows after the Gong Show was campus events. I played fraternity parties. I played dances for the liberal arts department, the computer department. They would have these dinner dances, and I would play the dinner dance. I would play these shows on campus or off campus. But then my friend Bill and Sue Gould, who was in the chat room with us, they hired us to play our first outside of campus professional gig at their wedding. And I know they're celebrating their anniversary of probably 40, I guess, anniversary. Congratulations, Bill and Sue. But we played at a country club, St. Clair Country Club, I believe it was. And from that point on, it opened up a door for us to play a lot of country club events, because the word of mouth got around the multiple society events in the Pittsburgh area that there was this band that was playing great big band music. So I started playing a lot of different events off campus at these private parties. And mind you, this sort of leads us into my history. A lot of dancers that came to our original dance event, Jeremy, I was telling you, they weren't swing dancers per se. There was a club on campus of Appalachian cloggers. And these cloggers were discovering lindy hop. So in 1980, 1981 or so, there was this nucleus of swing dancing enthusiasts in Pittsburgh that would support my events and come and dance to us. And they were cloggers by trade, but they wanted to learn how to swing dance. So they started coming and dancing to the events. I really think that they were the original revivalists of swing dancing in Pittsburgh. Or this is even before New York and LA and San Francisco, to tell you the truth. We're talking 80, 81. So this is pre-internet era too. So all these different factions of lindy hoppers and big band enthusiasts, they were not connected by the internet. So people didn't know what was going on in different places. I mean, it's hard for people today to really phantom that. But there was a time where you had to send a letter to someone to tell them something. You know what I mean?
I'm curious. I did a little research and looked up some Appalachian clogging, and it is fascinating because it reminds me of a cross between somewhat Irish dancing and the bop that I did in the 70s to 50s rock and roll. And it's like the footwork is like a little bit between all of that, and that with a bit of tap dancing thrown in. So
right.
When they came to your concerts, did they just try the clogging but to your rhythm, or did they actually start looking at how did people swing dance to this music, and then try to adapt to that?
Well, I think in the very beginning, they cleared up spaces and tables, and they actually tried to do at least basic 6-count swing dancing. Mind you, the 8-count swing out and such was not on the horizon at that time. But I remember just basic 6-count swing dancing was the norm, and I remember seeing them dancing, and I didn't know what it was actually myself. I mean, I wasn't up on that curve, so this was all new to me. So the fact that I was leading a big band, and there was even someone who was interested in big band music, was a revelation to me, for sure. And this kind of led into my foray into the bustling punk rock new wave scene, which is another chapter in the story. So I know when these cloggers were, we started getting the attention of the punk rockers in Pittsburgh at that time. And I see you put a photo of a big punk rock joint in Pittsburgh, the former Electric Banana. You see that banana that used to light up with a strobe light there all the time. But I really enjoyed the support of a lot of the new wave crowd, and they loved me because I was so non-conformist. I was like the ultimate nonconformist to, to what everybody was rebelling against. So I actually used to do events at the Electric Banana and play big band music, like Glenn Miller's American Patrol and Count Basie's 1 O'Clock Jump, and some cloggers dancers would come out and swing dance to us, but an equal amount of punk rockers would come and slam dance to us. So it was a wild scene, those early early 80s in Pittsburgh, and it really opened up my eyes because it was the energy and the joy that was emulating from the music that really captured the newcomers, the folks that weren't familiar with big band music. In fact, the older generation didn't like us because they thought we were too swinging for their tastes. I mean, I think folks that were up and they got so brainwashed by the Guy Lombardo, Lawrence Welk style. Mind you, those are reputable styles, but honestly, they did not swing too good. You know what I mean?
Well, I tell you what, that's a great lead-in to just share music from one of the new wave bands who were very good friends of yours and who you interacted with and who I think you mentioned got you your first gig at the Electric Banana. And let's just play this and everybody can enjoy Car Sickness.
Jeremy, that was amazing how you seamlessly threw in our version of a sing, sing, sing with all that. And that punk rock music must be such a drastic change in our musical repertoire this afternoon because, Car Sickness was really dear friends of mine, and they really supported my band, and they're great guys. There was the front man was named Joe Soap, the drummer was Dennis, and there was a keyboardist Archie, and they even had a saxophone. They had a horn player, Don. So they actually, besides being a punk rock band, they had some semblance of jazz in their music, and it was an interesting time, Jeremy. I'm glad I was able to experience that crossover period for sure.
I think it's fascinating and something which, I hadn't even appreciated as someone who grew up in London and as a teenager in the, punk era, going to the Marquee Club in Wardour Street and sort of loving 50s rock and roll and punk. Here's you in Pittsburgh at an incredibly creative time when in a sense, these misfits in the sense that they weren't getting gigs at some of the mainstream clubs, the Decade and other clubs in the city. And that here was this venue that gave them a chance. And you were doing something that also was about energy. It was about your audience being engaged and moving to the music and bringing something that was completely different that nobody had really seen before. And so there you are with the new wave and the punks, big band swing to the Electric Banana. And
yes,
we've sort of come to end of the time here, but I want to just read out one sort of really touching quote from a newspaper article that actually was 1983. So it was around the time you were playing at the Electric Banana, and so this was 1983, and you said in this article, G estimates his band has played 300 dates around Pittsburgh since its 1980 debut at the Carnegie Mellon University Gong Show, and must be the only group ever to play both the Alamany Country Club and the New Wave Electric Banana. So
true that.
That's something. That's something. And, we're going to, in the segment two, we'll start off when we start segment two with, I'd love to have a deeper exploration of your interaction with the new wave musical artists, because I think it's really fascinating aspect of your creativity that, you had this relationship with a musical form that people nowadays, no one would associate big band swing with new wave and the freshness and the energy and the creativity of new wave at that era. And I just want to finish off by sharing something with you, George, that is your own words, but a quote from 1983 in that same article in the Pittsburgh Press, and this is a quote from George G. of that era. A few years ago, people would come up and say, "You're behind the times," but now I'm beginning to think that I'm ahead of the times, says band leader George G. A walking campaign to revive the big band era. And look what happened.
I guess 37 years later, I'm still at it. I guess I'm gonna keep doing it till I get it right. I guess you know what I mean. I mean, Jeremy. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And really, the part two of this event next Friday,
Yeah.
I want to let the folks that are, there's so much more. The second half of this story, I think, is even more personally interesting because it involves coming back to New York City, meeting my wife Mitsumi in Japan, being involved with the great Frankie Manning, Norma Miller, and Don Hampton, and Swing 46, and and the current path that I'm taking in the greatest city of the world. Mind you, I'm a little biased, but New York City is my hometown, and the thing in the events that I played at Roseland for Frankie, the Frankie Manning Centennial. So I hope folks out there, if thank you so much for your interest in this because I like to think that I'm very humble, that I'm not deserving of all this attention, but I'm very flattered. And like I said, Jeremy, like this during this lockdown of the last couple of weeks, I've spent the time not just interacting with my family on a regular basis, but I spent a lot of time organizing my YouTube channel, and I discovered all these videos and organizing it of my 40-year so far career, and I'm very proud of it. So if you get a chance, folks, please take a look at it because there are some interesting stuff, and all the shaky camera stuff I deleted. Okay.
I will want to emphasize that it is amazing historical record, and I will put there is actually already a link on my page for portrait conversation, but I'll emphasize that I'm going to just show the portrait, see where we've ended up.
Okay.
And let's have a look. So here we go. This is the iPad on your screen, and I'll show the replay. And you've been a wonderful portrait subject, George. So here it is developing on Van Alexander's score for Let's Get Together, which is so apt for your philosophy about people and getting together and being happy with swing music. So there you are. You are sort of portrayed on my iPad. I'll make sure I do a beautiful print for you to hang up at home. And,
yes. Wow. And thank you for ignoring my double chin. I really appreciate that.
Anything's possible with digital. What I thought we'd end on here, so just like the parting, so to speak, you and I will say goodbye to everybody. And rather than for me end the actual meeting, what I'm going to do is just play for a few minutes. One of the earliest videos of George with his band, it's not the earliest, but one of them, 1986. George, you were playing at the
Civic Arena, which is a giant arena that's no longer there. And it's a program for Carnegie Mellon University, and it's produced by my dear friend, Hollywood screenwriter Ron Friedman.
So it's good afternoon from George in Astoria, Queens, New York. And it's good morning still just about from me in San Francisco. And thank you all for coming along. And thank you, George, for just being so generous with sharing your story.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just sign off here with you playing at the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh in 1986.
Be well, everybody out there. Be safe.
Ladies and gentlemen, Carnegie alumnus George G. and his Make-Believe Ballroom Orchestra. George G.
How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? Well, very happy to be part of this wonderful, wonderful evening of music, tears, and laughter. I'd like you all to know that most of the members of the Make-Believe Ballroom Orchestra are from Carnegie Mellon. And, hey, why don't you catch some CMU? Stand up and take a bow. Some of us even passed English, but I ain't gonna brag about that too much. We're all members in good standing of the American Federation of Musicians, who's been kind enough to make special arrangements so we can swing for you tonight. So grab onto your sporrans, fellow tartans, and let's cut us some plaid. How about a nice song from our singer, Miss Sandy Dow? All right.
What a day this has been. What a rare mood I'm in. Why, it's almost like being in love. Got a smile on my face for the whole human race. Why, it's almost like being in love. All the music of life seems to be like a bell that is ringing for me. And from the way that I feel when that bell starts to peal, I would swear I was falling. I could swear I was falling. It's almost like being in love. All the music of life, it seems to be like a bell that is ringing for me. And from the way that I feel when that bell starts to peal, I would swear I was falling. I could swear I was falling. It's almost like being in love. It's almost like being in love.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Make-Believe Ballroom Orchestra. All right.